So because they thought the first temple was stone front, so they thought that is how temples are supposed to be. So many Indian people had objection. What Swamiji is opening? What type of temples? There is no Gopuram, there is no this, there is no that. So many things they were saying. But Srila Prabhupada, he just took anything and everything, any building. So many churches. Prabhupada took churches, converted them into temples. Any building Prabhupada took, made it into a temple. So that was a major adjustment Srila Prabhupada did. So again, the principle is to establish temples where the Lord is established. Now, what type of building and this and that, that's a detail. So that's what Srila Prabhupada did.
Prabhuji, all the marriages he conducted amongst his disciples.
Yes, very good.
We never hear any spiritual leader do that, but Prabhupada had a need to do that.
Yes, so Prabhupada, of course, writes it in the Bhagavad Gita purport also, that as a sannyasi is never supposed to perform marriage ceremonies. But because there was nobody else to do it in the Western countries, Srila Prabhupada himself did that.
He even gave his own.
Anyway, we can't hear you. So in this way, Srila Prabhupada made so many adjustments in the Western countries. Srila Prabhupada also allowed women to actually stay in the temples, the Brahmacharini ashram, which was again a new concept. So in this way, Srila Prabhupada introduced various adjustments in his preaching. And we find as a result of that, the preaching really flourished all over the Western world. And then that's how the Indians became attracted to Srila Prabhupada. So now, taking that example that Srila Prabhupada, he brought down the number of rounds of chanting to 16. So now can somebody say that, okay, now 50 years have passed, ISKCON has been established. And maybe after some years, maybe say another 50 years from now, if somebody says that, okay, now Kali Yuga has progressed sufficiently, so now maybe we should bring down the number of rounds of chanting to 8. Because anyway, the number of rounds is a detail, isn't it? So can we do that?
No, 16 cannot.
So now 16 rounds of chanting, is it a principle or a detail?
Both, Prabhuji.
Why do you say both?
Because it is from our founder Acharya.
So?
We cannot change it, Prabhuji.
Yes, so it is a principle.
For us, it's a principle.
Yes, for us within ISKCON, it is a non-adjustable principle because Srila Prabhupada wanted that standard for all time to come within our society. So similarly, there are other standards which Srila Prabhupada has established, like the morning program, what song is to be sung during the Mangalarti. Which song do we sing during Mangalarti?
Samsarada.
Yes, the Guru Ashtakam prayers. So that has to be the song. Nobody can say, oh, now we got bored of this song. Now maybe something new should be there. So similarly, we have the Govindamadi Purusham prayers during Darshanarti. Then we have a fixed song for Guru Puja. We have a fixed song for Sandhyarti. So all these, though apparently details, now within our society, they've all become non-adjustable principles. They cannot be changed. Okay. So therefore, one has to very carefully understand what are principles and what are details. Okay. So let's see this quote of Srila Prabhupada. Okay, somebody read.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Yeah. My god brothers criticize me that I have allowed women to live in our temples. This is not in India. only brahmacharis can live. But I have become successful because I have made this adjustment. Although they criticize me, their Gaudiya matas are empty. The only time they have people coming is during Gaura Purnima to Mayapur for parikrama. And who is coming for parikrama? Widows, women in, because I have made this adjustment, I was successful.
Okay, so Srila Prabhupada himself was saying that yes, he became successful because of his adjustments that he made in his preaching in the Western world. And of course, we also know how Srila Prabhupada, he traveled to the West, and then he was traveling in airplanes throughout the world, traveled throughout the world 14 times. So all these are significant adjustments that Srila Prabhupada has made. And of course, those were adjustments which even Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur did during his time. So he himself began that revolution of Yukta Vairagya, using everything in Krishna's service. So Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur himself, sometimes to meet British people, he would dress up in suit and coat and tie, and then he went in a car to Radha Kund. So it was all revolutionary. He introduced dioramas. So Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur also made a lot of adjustments in his preaching, and then Srila Prabhupada followed that. So, as we were saying that sometimes what is a principle and what is a detail may become a little confusing, because we just now gave examples that apparently though some things may be details within ISKCON, they have now become principles. Correct? So sometimes there are controversies because what can be adjusted, what cannot be adjusted, sometimes becomes controversial. So then how to deal with that? So there's this pastime which Shuddhagiti Prabhu tells. Please read.
Yeah, sure. Shrutakirti, as he moved to massage Prabhupada's side, asked Prabhupada, how can we tell the difference between making an adjustment and changing the principle? Prabhupada's eyes closed and Shrutakirti continued to massage. After a few moments, Prabhupada opened his eyes and said, that takes a little intelligence.
Yes, that takes a little intelligence. So now Bhajan Prabhu is giving a purport on this very precise statement of Srila Prabhupada, that takes a little intelligence. Read.
Still loading, bro.
Prabhu, your voice is breaking. Somebody else can read.
Not here. Yeah.
Yes, Prabhuji, I will read. Principle detail. Shrutakirti's question was penetrating, clearly delineating between the adjustable and non-adjustable, between a detail and a principle is not easy. It requires intelligence. To foolishly mistake a non-adjustable principle for an adjustable detail will cause havoc in spiritual life, and to accept each detail as if it can never be adjusted is fanaticism. Fanaticism will cause havoc of a different nature. If we have developed our spiritual intelligence, we can make distinction between principles and details, but we should confirm our opinions with the trusted friends or superiors. If we haven't developed our spiritual intelligence, we should take guidance from those who have. We should not act independently.
Okay, so to foolishly mistake a non-adjustable principle for an adjustable detail will cause havoc in spiritual life. So if something is a principle which cannot be changed, which cannot be adjusted, but one does that, then there can be havoc. So just like we have the Ritviks who made a significant adjustment or a deviation in the first principle which Rupa Goswami has given, and that is to accept a bona fide spiritual master. So they have made a great adjustment in that, and therefore you can see there's so much havoc. And at the same time, he says that if one does not to accept each detail as if it can never be adjusted, is fanaticism. So if one does not make adjustments in details according to time, place, and circumstances, then that will be fanaticism. So just like we said, Srila Prabhupada made adjustments in details and therefore preaching flourished according to time, place, and circumstances. So just like now in the recent times also, devotees, according to time, place, and circumstances, also made some adjustments in preaching, brought out some new preaching strategies. Now, for example, this online preaching. So it was obviously not there during Srila Prabhupada's time, but during the pandemic, then the devotees took advantage of this online platform for preaching, and then a lot of preaching took place. But if one would say that no, Srila Prabhupada never used all this, so we can't use it, then we are losing out on preaching opportunities. So therefore, if one does not make adjustments in some details according to time, place, and circumstances, then that would also be called as fanaticism. But the important point is that, as Burjan Prabhu is writing here, if we have developed our spiritual intelligence, then that is fine. But normally a Vaishnava would not be proud enough to say that I have developed my spiritual intelligence. And so therefore, a Vaishnava always consults other Vaishnavas before making some adjustments, before making some changes. So that is always the safe path. So just like we have the wonderful example of how Parikshit Maharaj, he had already made up his mind to fast for 7 days on the banks of the Ganges. But when all these great, learned, powerful sages assembled there, so we know that Vyasadeva, Narad Muni, Vashishta, Vishwamitra, so many of these great sages assembled. So when all these great sages assembled, then Parikshit Maharaj, he confirmed his decision with all of them. He had already made his decision to fast and just hear, but he confirmed that decision with all the great sages present there. So there, Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he writes this important statement: any decision, however important it may be, must always be confirmed with higher authorities. That makes the matter perfect. Okay, so this is in the first canto, 19th chapter. I suppose it is verse number 35. So any decision, however important it may be, must always be confirmed with higher authorities. So that's a safe path. So as Gurujan Prabhu is writing, it's always better to confirm our opinions with trusted friends or superiors, especially when we're making some changes in some things. So it's always better to confirm, and then we can always be on the safe path. Okay, so this is about principles and details. So now we will just go through the list. So the entire chapter is basically a list of the 64 angas of bhakti. So we will just read the first 20, which are the most important. The first 10 are pravriti, things to do, and the next 10 are things, nivritti, which things to be avoided. So we'll just read this list of 20 items. So somebody can read this list of 20 items.
In the book, Prabhuji, or
yes, in the book. In the book, he mentions the basic principles as follows. The second paragraph.
He mentions the basic principles as follows. 1. Accepting the shelter of the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master. 2. Becoming initiated by the spiritual master and learning how to discharge devotional service from him. 3. Obeying the orders of the spiritual master with faith and devotion. 4. Following in the footsteps of great acharyas, teachers, under the direction of the spiritual master. 5. Inquiring from the spiritual master how to advance in Krishna consciousness. 6. Being prepared to give up anything material for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This means that when we are engaged in the devotional service of Krishna, we must be prepared to give up something which we may not like to give up. And also, we have to accept something which we may not like to accept. 7. Residing in a sacred place of pilgrimage like Dwarka or Vrindavana. Accepting only what is necessary or dealing with the material world only as far as necessary. 9. Observing the fasting day on Ekadashi. And 10. Worshipping sacred trees like the banyan tree.
Continue.
These 10 items are preliminary necessities for beginning the discharge of devotional service in regulative principles. In the beginning, if a neophyte devotee observes the above mentioned 10 principles, surely he will quickly make good advancement in Krishna consciousness. The next set of instructions is listed as follows. 1. One should rigidly give up the company of non-devotees. 2. One should not instruct a person who is not desirous of accepting devotional service. 3. One should not be very enthusiastic about constructing costly temples or monasteries. 4. One should not try to read too many books or nor should one develop the idea of earning his livelihood by lecturing on or professionally reciting Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. 5. One should not be neglectful in ordinary dealings. 6. One should not be under the spell of lamentation in loss or jubilation in gain. 7. One should not disrespect the demigods. 8. One should not give unnecessary trouble to any living entity. 9. One should carefully avoid the various offenses in chanting the holy name of the Lord or in worshipping the deity in the temple. 10. One should be very intolerant toward the blasphemy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, or his devotees.
Just read one more paragraph.
Without following the above mentioned 10 principles, one cannot properly elevate himself to the platform of sadhana bhakti or devotional service in practice. Altogether, Srila Rupa Goswami mentions 20 items and all of them are very important. Out of the 20, the first 3, namely accepting the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, taking initiation from him, and serving him with respect and reverence, are the most important.
Okay, so the first 20 are most important, and amongst the first 20 also, the first 3 are most important. And you can go through the rest of the list of these 64 angas of bhakti. And the last 5 are a very, very potent Panchanga Bhakti. So as you can see in the end of the chapter, Prabhupada is mentioned, out of these 64 items, 5 items, namely worshipping the deity, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, associating among the devotees, Sankirtan, and living in Mathura are very important.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, one question.
Go ahead.
It says in number 13 actually, one should not be very enthusiastic about constructing costly temples or monasteries. Is costly the word there, Prabhuji? It's about temples we need to have as many as possible.
Okay, so almost the rest of the discussion on sadhana bhakti till chapter number 14 is basically an elaboration of all these 64 angas of bhakti. Okay, so we'll be discussing on most of these angas of bhakti in our subsequent classes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, can you explain again about this point? One should not be very enthusiastic about constructing temples, costly temples.
Yeah, we said that we'll be discussing about all these angas of bhakti in our subsequent classes.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes.
The instruction on we should actually take guidance from those who have spiritual intelligence on on understanding what is adjustable and what is not adjustable. How far do we go, Prabhuji? Like, should we, even the smallest of small decisions, should we consult, or this is very hard in Kali Yuga, right, Prabhuji? We are all, at least if I talk about myself, I'm conditioned to be independent. I'm conditioned to think that I can take some decisions. And being a professional also in work at workplace, that is what they look for, Prabhuji. They ask us to or expect us to be independent and sort of take decisions. So to remember that we have to consult, to remember that we have to consult always. Like, how far do we go there, Prabhuji?
Yes, of course. There are some things which are quite straightforward, and some things are given in the book. Some things are we hear in lectures. So it's not that for every small thing we need to consult. Some things are quite obvious, but some things which we feel are something which is a more major change, or something which we are in a dilemma or something like that, then we should consult. It's always better to consult. If we think that we're making some change which is not normal, then it's always better to consult.
Right.
So
say, for example, children want to do something. Do we support them blindly, or do we consult and then support, Prabhuji?
so then again, it all depends on what's the matter about.
Got you.
So it's not that we have to consult some spiritual authorities what to cook for breakfast today and what to cook for lunch.
Yes, Prabhuji.
So there are some things which are, so obviously there is the broad instruction. Broad instructions are there as to what is to be offered, what is not to be offered. So those instructions are there by Krishna himself and by the acharyas. So those things are already there. And within those instructions, then there are details that we can work out. So, but if there's some major changes, then those we need to consult. But if, in any case, if there's a doubt, it's always better to consult.
Right, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Anything else?
Prabhuji, fasting on Ekadashi or eating non-grain food stuff. So is that a principle and a detail? Like, we have to, by principle, fast on Ekadashi, but then we have a lot of non-grain.
Yes. So that's a detail.
Okay.
So within what is permissible on Ekadashi, then we have a choice. But the essential principle, as we'll be discussing, the essential principle is to increase our devotional service, our devotional activities on Ekadashi. That's the important principle.
Right.
And then whatever is required, we do it, as far as eating is concerned.
Right.
All right. Okay, fine. So if there are no more questions, then we'll stop for today, and we'll continue our discussions on Monday with the 7th chapter.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu ki jai, Shri Rupa Goswami Pad ki jai, Sameet Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavad pranam.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavad pranam. Yes, Prabhuji.
Dandavad pranam, Prabhuji.
Lilananda, Prabhuji, you are muted. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji, we can hear you.
You can stop recording whoever is recording. You don't need to.